A Jedi gets banished to a prison planet and accidentally creates the most terrifying witches in the galaxy. Sometimes the worst nightmares start with the best intentions. This is 600 years before the Clone Wars. The Jedi Order thinks it has a solution for Force users who break their rules. Send them away, lock them up, let them fade into obscurity on worlds nobody cares about. For most prisoners, this works exactly as planned. But then there was Alia. Alia was a Jedi Knight who crossed lines the Order would not tolerate. Her crimes remain unknown to history, but the punishment was clear. Exiled to Dathomir, a remote prison world where dangerous beings get sent to disappear forever. The Jedi Council probably thought they were protecting the galaxy by removing her from it. Instead, they planted seeds for something far more dangerous than one rogue knight could ever be. Dathomir was not an empty rock. Female survivors from various species lived scattered across the planet. Descendants of prisoners and castaways forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. These women had learned to survive in hostile wilderness filled with predators and deadly terrain. They fought alone, hiding from each other as much as from the creatures hunting them. Alia saw potential where others saw only waste. Using her Force powers, she brought these survivors together. She taught them to sense the energy flowing through all living things. She showed them how to move objects with their minds and feel danger before it struck. Within years, she transformed frightened survivors into powerful Force users. The women who learned from Alia called themselves the Daughters of Alia. They formed the Witches of Dathomir, an all-female order that would shape the planet for centuries. But Alia knew that power without rule leads to corruption. She had seen what happened when Force users followed their emotions instead of discipline. She had lived that mistake herself. So Alia created the Book of Law. This document became the foundation for everything the witches would believe. She based her rules on Jedi teachings, the same code that once guided her before exile. The most important rule was simple but absolute. No witch could touch the dark side of the Force. The dark side offers quick power through anger, fear, and hatred. It corrupts slowly, turning good intentions into selfish desires and noble goals into ruthless ambition. Alia warned her students that darkness always promises more than it delivers. The price for dark power was losing yourself piece by piece until nothing good remained. The Daughters of Alia took her warning seriously. They spread across Dathomir as their numbers grew, forming separate clans that each followed the Book of Law. These clans lived by light side traditions, using the Force for protection and healing rather than domination. For generations, the system worked. The witches stayed pure, avoiding the temptations that destroyed so many Force users throughout galactic history. But the Book of Law included harsh consequences for anyone who strayed. Some witches grew curious about forbidden techniques called night spells. These were dark side magics that offered power Alia explicitly banned. Any witch caught experimenting with night spells faced immediate exile from her clan. The punishment mirrored what happened to Alia herself. Exiled witches were cast out into the wilderness, forced to live alone without clan support or protection. The other witches believed isolation would contain the darkness before it spread. A single corrupted witch living apart could not infect others with her choices. This practice created a growing population of outcast witches scattered across Dathomir. They lived in caves and ruins, practicing their forbidden arts in secret. The clans tried to ignore them, hoping distance would be enough to prevent contamination. For a while, it worked. Centuries passed. The Galactic Republic grew and prospered, while Dathomir remained isolated and forgotten. The light side clans continued following their traditions, believing they had successfully protected themselves from darkness. But temptation never truly disappears. It just waits for the right moment to return. As the Republic entered its final generations, something shifted. More witches began falling to the dark side despite knowing the consequences. Perhaps the isolation weakened their resolve. Perhaps darkness itself grew stronger as the Sith prepared their return to power. Whatever the reason, the number of exiled witches increased dramatically. The light side clans maintained their policy of banishment, trusting the old ways to protect them. Every witch caught using night spells got cast out to live among the other outcasts. The elders believed this kept their communities pure and safe from corruption. They were wrong. All those exiled witches had been living separately, each one alone with her forbidden knowledge. But exile creates bonds between those who share the same fate. Slowly, the outcasts began finding each other in the wilderness. They discovered they were not as alone as the clans intended them to be. These dark side practitioners started sharing their techniques with each other. One witch knew spells for creating illusions. Another had mastered ways to drain life energy. A third could summon spirits from beyond. Together, they combined their knowledge into something far more powerful than any single witch possessed. The stage was set for a dramatic change. All those isolated practitioners of dark magic were about to unite under a single leader. Someone ambitious enough to transform scattered outcasts into an organized force. Someone who would reject everything Alia taught and create a new order built entirely on the darkness she warned against. The Nightsisters were coming, and once they emerged, Dathomir would never be the same again. The leader of the outcast witches was not just anyone. She was the daughter of one of the most respected clan mothers on Dathomir, and she was about to turn everything her mother built into her worst nightmare. Gethzerion grew up inside the Singing Mountain clan, one of the most powerful light side groups on the planet. Her mother, Ogwyn Jo, ruled as clan mother, teaching the old ways and upholding the Book of Law. Gethzerion learned everything about Force abilities and clan leadership. She mastered techniques that took other witches years to understand. But knowledge and wisdom are not the same thing. Power has a way of revealing what people truly want. Gethzerion wanted more than her mother was willing to give. She believed the Singing Mountain clan should dominate Dathomir rather than coexist with other groups. The Book of Law frustrated her with its restrictions and moral boundaries. She saw rules where her mother saw protection. So Gethzerion decided to take what would not be given freely. She found an ally in another witch named Baritha who shared her ambitions. Together, they planned to remove Ogwyn and seize control of the Singing Mountain clan. The assassination attempt failed, but it revealed something the light side clans had always feared. Darkness could emerge even from their most promising members. The punishment was immediate and absolute. Ogwyn cast out her own daughter along with Baritha, sending them into exile as the Book of Law demanded. Gethzerion lost her home, her clan, and her family in a single day. Most exiled witches spent years wandering alone before finding others like themselves. Gethzerion took a different path. She went looking for the other outcasts immediately. Gethzerion knew exactly what she wanted to build, and isolation would not help her achieve it. She traveled across Dathomir seeking every exiled witch she could find. Some lived in caves, others hid in abandoned ruins. A few had gone half-mad from loneliness and rejection. Gethzerion offered them something they had lost when their clans banished them: purpose, belonging, a chance to stop hiding and start claiming what the galaxy owed them. She gathered these scattered practitioners of forbidden arts and gave them a new identity. They would not apologize for their power or pretend darkness was weakness. The outcasts came together in remote areas far from the light side territories. They shared their night spells openly, teaching each other techniques the clans had tried to bury. One witch knew how to create illusions that drove victims insane. Another could manipulate shadows into physical weapons. A third had learned to drain life force from living beings. Gethzerion absorbed all this knowledge and added her own innovations. She declared herself clan mother of this new group and gave them a name that would strike fear across Dathomir: the Nightsisters. They took the title from the night spells they practiced, transforming what was meant as a warning into a badge of pride. But Gethzerion understood that power needs structure. Chaos serves no one except enemies looking for weakness. She created the Book of Shadows as a direct answer to her mother's Book of Law. Where Alia's teachings focused on restraint and morality, the Book of Shadows celebrated ambition and strength. The new scripture rejected the idea that good and evil mattered. Power was the only measure that counted. The Book of Shadows detailed every dark spell and ritual the Nightsisters discovered. It explained how to cast illusions, summon spirits, and bend others to their will. Most importantly, it freed the witches from guilt about using these abilities. The Nightsisters developed their own unique style of force use called shadow magic. This went beyond standard dark side techniques into something older and wilder. They tapped into the primal energies flowing through Dathomir itself, calling on ancient spirit deities for power. The Fanged God and Winged Goddess became their patrons, entities that existed outside Jedi and Sith understanding. Their magic manifested as green mist that surrounded the witches during spell casting. They could turn invisible, transform their appearance, and even raise the recently fallen to fight again. These abilities made them fundamentally different from other dark side users in the galaxy. The Sith followed a code and philosophy. The Nightsisters followed instinct and tradition passed down through their new order. As the clan grew stronger, Gethzerion encouraged her followers to have children and raise them in Nightsister ways from birth. These daughters learned dark magic before they could walk. They grew up believing power was virtue and weakness was shame. The second generation of Nightsisters never knew anything except what Gethzerion taught them. Success brought new challenges. The growing Nightsister population eventually split into multiple covens, each with its own leader and territory. These groups competed with each other for resources and influence, though they remained united under the broader Nightsister identity. The fracturing mirrored how the Lightside clans had divided centuries earlier. The covens fought not just among themselves, but against anyone who crossed their path. Lightside clans found themselves under constant pressure from Nightsister raids and attacks. The Dark Witches used their illusion spells to terrorize villages and steal supplies. They demonstrated that following the Book of Law made you vulnerable to those who rejected it entirely. Fear became the Nightsisters' greatest weapon. Other Dathomirians learned to avoid certain territories and stay alert for signs of dark magic. The green mist that accompanied Nightsister spells became a warning that something terrible approached. Within a generation, the Nightsisters transformed from scattered outcasts into the most feared group on the entire planet. Outsiders who heard about Dathomir often confused the Nightsisters with Sith. Both groups used the dark side and pursued power without moral limits. But the comparison misses important differences. The Sith followed rules established by Darth Bane. Only two could exist at once, a master and apprentice locked in inevitable betrayal. The Nightsisters had no such restrictions. They also drew power from different sources. Sith connected to the dark side through passion and emotion. Nightsisters channeled Dathomir's wild energy and ancient spirits. Their techniques looked like sorcery, where Sith abilities appeared as pure force manipulation. The end results might seem similar, but the paths to power diverged completely. To the people of Dathomir, these distinctions mattered less than the practical reality. The Nightsisters filled the role of dark side villains in their culture. They represented everything the light side clans fought against. The comparison one Republic soldier eventually made captured this perfectly. The Nightsisters were Dathomir's version of the Sith, homegrown darkness that needed no outside influence to thrive. Gethzerian had accomplished something remarkable through pure ambition and ruthlessness. She turned a collection of broken outcasts into a lasting power that would haunt Dathomir for centuries. The Nightsisters were here to stay, and their shadow would only grow longer as time passed. Pirates changed everything about the Nightsisters without meaning to. They just wanted to dump their cargo and leave. Instead, they delivered the genetic material that would transform the witches into something far more dangerous. Several centuries before the Republic collapsed, a group of off-world pirates made a terrible navigation error. Their ship carried a hold full of male Zabrak prisoners captured from various conflicts across the galaxy. Pirates often dealt in living cargo, selling captives to whoever paid the highest price. But this particular crew never found their buyers. The pirates landed on Dathomir looking for a place to hide from authorities pursuing them. They had no idea what kind of world they had stumbled onto. The Nightsisters found them first. Within hours of landing, the witches had taken control of the pirate ship and claimed everything aboard as their own. The pirates themselves provided little value to the Nightsisters. Most were eliminated quickly, but the Zabrak prisoners were different. The witches immediately recognized something useful about these horned humanoids. Zabraks were force-sensitive as a species, though most never developed their abilities. The Nightsisters sensed potential in that raw connection to the Force. More importantly, the witches discovered that Zabraks and humans were genetically compatible. They could produce offspring together. This opened possibilities that had not existed before. The Nightsisters had always been an all-female society, relying on interaction with light-side clans or outsiders for reproduction. Now they had access to males they could control completely. Gethzerion and the other clan mothers made a calculated decision. They would keep the Zabrak males as permanent additions to their society, not as equals or partners, but as property. The Zabraks would serve the Nightsisters in whatever capacity the witches demanded. Resistance was not an option. The Nightsisters began interbreeding with the Zabrak prisoners. The resulting children were hybrids who inherited physical and force traits from both species. The daughters born from these unions showed characteristics of their dual heritage. Some had the pale skin common to certain Zabrak populations. Others developed facial markings or bone structures that blended human and Zabrak features. These hybrid girls were welcomed into Nightsister society without reservation. The witches trained them in dark magic from birth, teaching them the same spells and rituals that pure human Nightsisters learned. The hybrid children proved just as capable of wielding shadow magic as their mothers. In some cases, the Zabrak bloodline seemed to enhance their force abilities. The male children received very different treatment. Boys born to Nightsister mothers were separated from the covens as soon as they could walk. They joined their fathers in segregated villages far from the main Nightsister territories. These males became known as the Night Brothers, a name that signaled both their connection to the witches and their inferior status. Night Brothers existed to serve. They worked as laborers, maintaining the villages where they lived. They trained as warriors to fight on behalf of the Nightsisters when needed. Most importantly, they remained available for breeding purposes whenever the witches decided to expand their numbers. The Night Brothers had no choice in any of this. The arrangement solidified what had always been true about Dathomir society. Women held all power and authority. Men lived apart and obeyed. The Nightsisters took this dynamic to its extreme by turning males into literal servants. Night Brothers could not leave their villages without permission. They could not refuse when selected for breeding. They could not question orders from any Nightsister. Some Night Brothers were force-sensitive like their mothers. The witches saw these males as particularly valuable resources. Force-sensitive Night Brothers could be enhanced through dark magic rituals, transformed into powerful warriors who served the covens. They could also be sacrificed in spells that required life force from Force users. Either way, their abilities belonged to the Nightsisters. The system worked because Night Brothers were conditioned from childhood to accept their role. Boys grew up knowing they existed to serve the witches. Rebellion meant punishment or elimination. Compliance meant survival and occasionally receiving small privileges. Most Night Brothers never questioned whether things could be different. Over generations, the Zabrak bloodline spread throughout the Nightsister covens. More and more witches were born as Dathomirian hybrids rather than pure humans. These hybrid Nightsisters developed their own aesthetic that blended both heritages. Pale skin became common. Facial tattoos marked different covens and ranks. Some adopted hairstyles and clothing that incorporated both human and Zabrak cultural elements. The Zabrak traits also changed how Nightsisters appeared to outsiders. The horns that male Night Brothers developed made them look inherently more threatening. The bone structure differences in female hybrids gave them an otherworldly appearance that enhanced their reputation for dark magic. Even the pale skin that many Dathomirians inherited made them seem ghostly and unnatural. But the most significant change was not physical. The introduction of Zabrak genetics diversified the force abilities available to the Nightsisters. Different Zabrak subspecies had evolved unique traits over millennia of adaptation to various homeworlds. When combined with human Nightsister bloodlines, these traits created new possibilities for magic and force manipulation. Some hybrid Nightsisters showed enhanced physical strength inherited from their Zabrak fathers. Others developed heightened pain tolerance or resistance to toxins. A few inherited the ability to enter focused battle states that made them nearly unstoppable warriors. The witches learned to identify and cultivate these traits, breeding Night Brothers selectively to produce desired characteristics in the next generation. The matriarchal system became absolute under this new arrangement. Female witches controlled every aspect of Night Brother existence. They decided which males bred with whom. They determined which boys would become warriors and which would perform manual labor. They even controlled whether individual Night Brothers lived or perished. This power dynamic would define Dathomir society for centuries. By the time the Clone Wars erupted across the galaxy, the most prominent Nightsisters were all Dathomirian hybrids. Asajj Ventress became one of the most feared dark side users in the galaxy, despite starting life as a Nightsister daughter. Mother Talzin rose to lead all Nightsister covens while wielding powers that terrified even Sith Lords. These powerful women owed their very existence to a random pirate ship that crashed on Dathomir centuries earlier. The Zabrak prisoners aboard that vessel had no idea their genes would create a new subspecies of Force users. They probably just wanted to survive their captivity and escape. Instead, they became the foundation for generations of witches who would shake the entire galaxy. The Nightsisters had evolved from human outcasts into something genuinely unique. They were no longer just dark side practitioners living on a forgotten prison world. They had become their own distinct culture with their own bloodline and their own terrifying abilities. And they were just getting started. One Nightsister decided the covens needed to stop fighting each other and start conquering the galaxy. She almost succeeded in wiping out the Republic's capital before anyone knew she existed. Around 31 years before the Clone Wars, a clan mother named Zalem emerged as the most ambitious Nightsister in centuries. She looked at Dathomir's feuding covens and saw wasted potential. These witches spent their energy fighting over territory and resources on a single planet. Zalem believed they should be ruling star systems instead. She declared herself Queen of Dathomir and demanded the other covens submit to her authority. This was not how Nightsister society worked. Each coven operated independently under its own clan mother. No single witch had ever claimed supremacy over all the others. But Zalem possessed force abilities that made other clan mothers hesitate to challenge her directly. Through a combination of intimidation and strategic alliances, Zalem brought multiple covens under her control. She promised them power beyond anything they had known. Dathomir would be just the beginning of their empire. The galaxy contained thousands of worlds ripe for conquest by those strong enough to take them. But Zalem needed more than just loyal followers. She required knowledge that the Nightsisters did not possess. The witches understood dark magic and Dathomir's primal forces. They knew nothing about galactic politics, advanced technology, or how the wider universe operated. Zalem needed someone who could teach her these things. A Jedi Knight provided exactly what she needed. This unfortunate Force user wandered to Dathomir on some forgotten mission and fell into Zalem's trap. She captured him using Nightsister illusions and binding spells. Instead of simply ending his life, she decided to extract everything he knew. Zalem forced the Jedi to become her mate. This was not about companionship or affection. She wanted access to Jedi teachings and lore that the Order guarded carefully. Over months of captivity, she pulled information from him about Republic politics, Jedi philosophy, and Force techniques unknown to Dathomir's witches. The union produced a daughter named Ros Lai. This child inherited Force sensitivity from both parents and would eventually play a crucial role in stopping her mother's schemes. But Zalem saw her daughter only as another tool to use when the time came. Once the Jedi had taught Zalem everything she could absorb, she ended his life without a second thought. He had served his purpose. The knowledge he provided now belonged to the Nightsisters. Zalem moved forward with plans that would have been impossible without the understanding she gained from her captive. She turned her attention to Dathomir's ancient history. Long before humans or Zabraks arrived, the planet belonged to a species called the Qua. This extinct civilization possessed technology that blended science and mysticism in ways the current galaxy could barely comprehend. The Qua had built structures across Dathomir before vanishing into history. Zalem spent years searching ruins that other witches had ignored. She explored forgotten temples buried under centuries of growth. Most contained nothing but crumbling stone and faded inscriptions. But Zalem persisted because legend spoke of weapons the Qua left behind, weapons capable of reshaping reality itself. Deep within a star temple hidden in Dathomir's most remote regions, Zalem found what she sought. The Infinity Gate stood dormant after millennia of silence. This artifact represented technology so advanced it seemed like magic even to Force users. The Qua had built multiple gates that could project devastating energy across impossible distances. The gates connected to each other through dimensions beyond normal space. Energy channeled into one gate could emerge from another on the opposite side of the galaxy. The Qua had used this network for transportation and communication, but they had also discovered the gates could be weaponized. Sufficient power directed through an infinity gate could theoretically erase entire worlds from existence. Zalem understood immediately what she held. This was not just a weapon. This was the key to galactic domination. No military could defend against an attack that ignored distance and conventional barriers. She could strike anywhere from Dathomir without ever leaving the planet. The Republic would fall before it even understood what destroyed it. She chose her first target carefully. Coruscant served as the Republic's capital and held symbolic importance across civilized space. The planet-wide city housed trillions of beings and the Senate that governed thousands of star systems. Destroying Coruscant would decapitate the Republic and throw the galaxy into chaos. In that chaos, Zalem would move. The Nightsisters would claim worlds while everyone else reeled from shock and confusion. By the time galactic civilization recovered enough to respond, the witches would control territory that made them impossible to dislodge. Or so Zalem believed. She began preparing the Infinity Gate for activation. The process required immense Force power channeled through specific rituals. Zalem gathered her most powerful followers and began the ceremony that would unleash destruction across light years of space. Energy built within the ancient structure as Dathomir itself seemed to respond to what the witches awakened. But someone noticed what was happening. Jedi Master Quinlan Vos had been investigating rumors about Dathomir and dark side activity there. His investigation led him to the Star Temple just as Zalem prepared to fire the gate. He realized within moments what she intended to do. Vos was one Jedi against dozens of Nightsisters. He should have been overwhelmed immediately, but he had an unexpected ally. Roslai had grown into a teenager who understood the implications of her mother's plan. Unlike Zalem, she grasped what destroying Coruscant would mean for Dathomir itself. The galaxy would not ignore the annihilation of an entire planet. Whoever survived would come to Dathomir seeking revenge. They would bring fleets and armies beyond anything the Nightsisters could resist. Zalem's ambition would not elevate the witches. It would paint a target on them that ensured their destruction. Roslai made a choice that defined her character completely. She turned against her mother during the final moments of the ritual. As energy built toward critical mass and Coruscant's doom approached, she grabbed her father's lightsaber from where Zalem kept it as a trophy. Mother and daughter faced each other in the heart of the Star Temple. Zalem commanded her to stand aside. Roslai refused. The confrontation lasted only seconds. Roslai drove the lightsaber through her mother's chest before Zalem could complete the activation sequence. Queen Zalem collapsed as the energy wave she had summoned dissipated harmlessly. Her reign ended exactly where it began, in the ruins of a civilization that had destroyed itself through ambition. Roslai stood over her mother's body, knowing she had just saved billions of lives at the cost of her family. Quinlan Vos took Roslai into Jedi custody. The teenager would face consequences for her mother's actions and her own role in the plot. But she would live, which was more than Zalem could say. The other Nightsisters who had followed the Queen scattered without their leader. The covens fell back into their old patterns of independent operation and territorial disputes. Zalem had united them briefly through force of personality and promises of power. With her gone, that unity evaporated. The Nightsisters returned to being dangerous but contained threats on a single world. However, something had changed permanently. The Jedi Council now knew about Dathomir and the witches who practiced dark magic there. Reports reached Coruscant about how close the Republic had come to destruction. The Infinity Gate crisis became classified information, but it ensured the Jedi would monitor Dathomir going forward. The Nightsisters had announced themselves to the galaxy in the worst possible way. They had tried to commit mass destruction on a scale that would have dwarfed any tragedy in recent history. Only betrayal from within had stopped them. The witches remained isolated on their prison world, but now they were isolated with the galaxy's attention focused on them. A new leader would eventually rise to unite the covens once more. But that leader would need to be smarter than Zalem. The next time the Nightsisters reached for galactic power, they would need to be far more subtle about it. The Nightsisters needed a leader who understood that real power comes from patience rather than spectacle. Mother Talzin gave them exactly that, and in doing so, made them more dangerous than ever before. Talzin emerged from among the clan mothers as someone different from those who came before. She did not seize power through violence like Gethzarian or proclaim herself royalty like Zalem. Instead, she offered something the fractured covens desperately needed after years of infighting and failed schemes: stability. The other clan mothers recognized her wisdom and force abilities as exceptional even among Nightsisters. Talzin possessed shamanistic powers that went beyond standard dark magic. She could commune with spirits and tap into Dathomir's deepest energies in ways that inspired both respect and fear. When she proposed reuniting the covens under single leadership, most agreed without conflict. Talzin deliberately avoided the title of queen. That word carried too much baggage after Zalem's catastrophic attempt at galactic conquest. Instead, she became mother to all Nightsisters, a role that suggested guidance rather than domination. The distinction mattered psychologically, even though her authority remained absolute. Under her leadership, the covens entered their most prosperous period in generations. Talzin focused on internal development rather than external expansion. She wanted the Nightsisters strong and secure on Dathomir before concerning herself with the wider galaxy. Building a foundation took priority over grabbing immediate power. She instituted new laws that formalized what had been informal practice. Nightsister women could only take Night Brothers as mates. This decree eliminated any possibility of outside bloodlines, diluting the Dathomirian hybrid strain the witches had cultivated. It also reinforced the complete separation between female and male populations. The Night Brothers continued living in their segregated villages, far from the main Nightsister stronghold. Males came to the witches only when summoned for breeding, labor, or combat training. Otherwise, they remained apart and powerless. Talzin saw no reason to change an arrangement that kept potential threats contained. Male Force users born to the Nightsisters faced particularly strict control. These boys showed abilities that could be dangerous if developed freely. Talzin ensured they received no training in Jedi or Sith philosophy. The Night Brothers learned only what the witches wanted them to know, which was how to fight and obey orders. Some Force-sensitive males became elite warriors through Nightsister enhancement rituals. Others served as living batteries for spells that required male Force energy. A few were sacrificed outright when their life force could power particularly potent magic. The Night Brothers had no say in which fate awaited them. This system prevented any male from accumulating enough knowledge and power to challenge Nightsister authority. The witches maintained total control over their society by keeping males isolated, uneducated, and dependent. Talzin perfected a structure that Gethzerion had begun centuries earlier. She also deepened the spiritual aspects of Nightsister culture. While previous leaders focused on expanding power and territory, Talzin emphasized connection to the entities that made their magic unique. The Fanged God and Winged Goddess became central to Nightsister rituals and daily practice. These ancient deities existed in the spirit realm that paralleled the physical world of Dathomir. The witches learned to reach across the barrier between realms and channel power from these beings. This gave them access to abilities that neither Jedi nor Sith could replicate through standard Force techniques. The Nightsisters referred to their art as magic, deliberately spelling it differently to distinguish their practice from ordinary tricks or illusions. Their magic drew from Dathomir's wild planetary energy, combined with the power of spirit entities. It manifested visually as green mist that surrounded the witches during spellcasting. Talzin taught her followers advanced techniques that previous generations had only scratched the surface of understanding. They mastered illusions so convincing that victims could not distinguish them from reality. They conjured actual physical mist that concealed their movements or choked enemies. They learned transfiguration spells that altered their appearance completely. The most disturbing ability was necromancy. Nightsisters could raise recently fallen bodies and animate them with dark energy. These were not true resurrections since the original person remained gone. But the animated corpses could fight and follow basic commands, creating armies from battlefields. They also developed potions and elixirs with various effects. Invisibility drafts let them move unseen even in daylight. Poisons could be tailored to affect specific species or individuals. Enhancement mixtures temporarily boosted strength and speed beyond natural limits. The Nightsisters became experts in blending chemistry with force manipulation. All these abilities appeared wrapped in the signature green mist that marked Nightsister magic. That eerie glow became their calling card across Dathomir and eventually in the wider galaxy. Anyone who saw green mist forming knew dark witches were nearby and trouble would follow. Talzin understood that isolation had limits. The Nightsisters needed resources and information about galactic affairs. Complete withdrawal from the universe left them vulnerable to surprises they could not anticipate. She needed a way to maintain contact with outside powers without drawing dangerous attention. Her solution was elegant and profitable. Talzin transformed the Nightsisters into a mercenary organization that operated quietly in the shadows. She trained her witches in combat techniques that complemented their magical abilities. Stealth, assassination, infiltration, and bodyguard work became standard skills for Nightsisters who ventured off-world. These services became available to those who knew how to reach Dathomir and could afford the price. Criminal syndicates hired Nightsister assassins for jobs requiring force abilities. Wealthy individuals employed them as bodyguards immune to standard threats. Corporations sometimes used them for industrial espionage and sabotage. The arrangement brought resources flowing into Dathomir without requiring the Nightsisters to pledge loyalty to any faction. They remained independent contractors who took payment and disappeared. This generated income while keeping the clan free from entangling alliances that could be exploited by enemies. It also gave Talzin intelligence about galactic politics and conflicts. Nightsisters working off-world reported back about Republic affairs, corporate schemes, and the movements of various power players. This information let Talzin make informed decisions about when to engage with outside forces and when to maintain distance. The Jedi Order knew about Dathomir and the witches who lived there. Reports from Quinlan Voss's mission against Zalem had made that unavoidable. But the Jedi chose to maintain a hands-off approach after the Infinity Gate crisis. They established a quarantine around Dathomir that discouraged travel to the system. This suited Talzin perfectly. The Jedi would not provoke conflict as long as the Nightsisters avoided obviously threatening the Republic. She could operate her mercenary network and continue building power without interference from the galaxy's official peacekeepers. Both sides benefited from keeping distance, but Talzin harbored ambitions that went beyond mercenary work and spiritual development. She had plans that would eventually bring her into direct conflict with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The Sith themselves would become her enemies and targets. Her own son would play a crucial role in those schemes. For now, though, she focused on making the Nightsisters stronger and more unified than they had ever been. Under her guidance, they became a true power on Dathomir, with reach extending across the stars. The witches who had started as scattered outcasts now operated as a cohesive organization with resources, training, and purpose. Mother Talzin had given them everything Gethzarian and Zalem had promised, but failed to deliver. She made the Nightsisters genuinely dangerous in ways that went beyond raw force power or ancient weapons. She made them organized, disciplined, and connected to galactic affairs while maintaining their independence and unique culture. The Clone Wars would soon erupt and drag the entire galaxy into chaos. When that happened, Mother Talzin would be ready to move. Her patience and careful preparation would position the Nightsisters to exploit the conflict in ways no one anticipated. The time for hiding was almost over. The Clone Wars brought opportunity knocking on Dathomir's door. The Nightsisters answered and immediately started scheming how to betray everyone involved. When the galaxy erupted into war in 22 years before the Battle of Yavin, new players emerged looking for advantages. Count Dooku led the Separatist alliance against the Republic, commanding armies and resources that dwarfed anything individual planets could muster. But Dooku wanted more than just battle droids and corporate backing. He wanted Force users. The Sith Lord heard rumors about Dathomir's witches through his network of informants and dark side contacts. These women supposedly wielded powers different from standard Force abilities. They operated outside Jedi jurisdiction and had no loyalty to the Republic. Dooku saw potential allies who could provide services his droid armies could not. A splinter group of Nightsisters, led by Sai Sirku and Yansu Gujak, made contact with the Count early in the conflict. These witches did not represent Mother Talzin or the main covens. They operated independently, seeking their own advantages in the galactic chaos. Dooku's offer of payment and resources interested them greatly. Sirku agreed to provide Nightsister services to the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Her faction would handle covert operations requiring Force sensitivity and skills that battle droids lacked completely. Espionage, infiltration, sabotage, and targeted elimination became their specialty. The Separatists gained highly effective operatives while the Nightsisters earned credits and influence. The arrangement worked smoothly at first. Sirku's witches completed missions across Republic space without leaving traces that pointed back to Dooku. They gathered intelligence about military movements and political decisions. They eliminated key Republic officers and sabotaged supply lines. The Separatist war effort benefited significantly from their contributions. Then Dooku brought them a special project that required more than simple assassination work. He wanted to develop a superweapon powered by kyber crystals stolen from lightsabers. These focusing crystals channeled Force energy in ways that made them ideal for weaponization. Dooku believed a device harnessing multiple crystals could generate destructive power rivaling planetary defenses. The Nightsisters helped smuggle kyber crystals from various sources across the galaxy. They used their Force abilities to locate hidden Jedi artifacts and infiltrate secure facilities. Their magic let them move undetected through areas that would stop conventional thieves. The crystal collection grew steadily under their efforts. Sirku's coven also participated in the experimental phase. The Nightsisters understood Force-attuned materials better than most Separatist scientists. Their insights helped solve technical problems that stalled the weapon's development. They seemed fully committed to making Dooku's superweapon functional. But the Jedi Council caught wind of unusual kyber crystal activity. Multiple thefts and black market transactions suggested someone was gathering these rare materials for unknown purposes. Jedi investigators began tracking the pattern, following leads that eventually pointed towards Separatist involvement. The Nightsisters realized the Jedi were closing in on the project. They also understood what would happen once Dooku completed his crystal superweapon. A Sith Lord with that kind of destructive capability would not limit himself to Republic targets. Anyone who knew about the weapon or helped build it became a potential liability. Dathomir itself might face annihilation if Dooku decided the Nightsisters knew too much. Serku made a calculated decision. The Nightsisters would protect themselves by destroying what they had helped create. She contacted the Jedi Council through anonymous channels and provided detailed information about the superweapon project. Location, specifications, security measures, everything the Jedi needed to launch a raid. Then she went further. Serku's coven actively sabotaged the weapon itself, introducing flaws that would cause catastrophic failure during any activation attempt. They corrupted data files and damaged critical components. When the Jedi finally struck, they found a project already falling apart from internal sabotage. Count Dooku learned about the betrayal too late to prevent it. His superweapon program collapsed in spectacular fashion as Republic forces captured or destroyed the research facilities. Worse yet, he knew exactly who had leaked the information and ruined months of work. The Nightsisters had played him from the beginning. The Count responded with fury. His forces hunted Serku's warship across multiple star systems. The Nightsisters fled, but could not shake Separatist pursuit. A final confrontation in deep space ended with Serku's vessel breaking apart under sustained fire from Dooku's fleet. Whether Serku herself survived remained unclear. The ship's destruction scattered debris across the combat zone, and no bodies were recovered. Some witnesses reported seeing escape pods launching before the final explosion. Others claimed the witches perished with their vessel. Dooku could not confirm either way, which frustrated him greatly. The incident taught the Sith Lord a valuable lesson about dealing with Nightsisters. They served only their own interests despite any agreements or payments. Loyalty meant nothing to witches who viewed everyone as either tools or threats. Dooku had been arrogant to think Force users outside Jedi or Sith traditions would follow his orders reliably. He also learned that Nightsisters were dangerous specifically because they refused to be categorized. They were not Sith bound by the rule of two. They were not Jedi constrained by their code. They operated according to logic that made sense only within their unique culture. This unpredictability made them unsuitable as long-term allies. Dooku increased surveillance on Dathomir after Serku's betrayal. He wanted advance warning if more Nightsisters decided to interfere with Separatist operations. The Count had no immediate plans for retaliation, but he filed away his grudge for future consideration. The witches had made an enemy who did not forget slights easily. Mother Talzin watched these events from Dathomir with satisfaction. Serku's splinter group had never represented the main Nightsister covens. Their actions reflected their own choices rather than Talzin's commands. But their betrayal of Dooku served her purposes perfectly. The incident demonstrated that Nightsisters could not be controlled by outsiders. Neither Sith nor Jedi could claim authority over Dathomir's witches. This independence was worth more than any temporary alliance with galactic powers. Talzin preferred being feared and avoided over being targeted for recruitment. She also noted how easily Serku had manipulated Dooku into trusting her. The Sith Lord's arrogance had blinded him to obvious warning signs. He assumed Force-sensitive operatives would naturally defer to someone trained in Sith tradition. That assumption had cost him dearly. Talzin filed this information away for her own future use. She had no current plans to engage with the Sith directly, but knowing their weaknesses might prove valuable when the time came, and she suspected that time would come sooner than anyone expected. The galaxy's war was still young. Conflicts would intensify and spread before any resolution emerged. Opportunities would present themselves to those patient enough to wait and clever enough to exploit them. One opportunity in particular interested her greatly. A young woman named Asajj Ventress had been taken from Dathomir as a child and trained as a dark side assassin. She currently served Count Dooku as his personal weapon against the Jedi. But Ventress was Dathomirian by birth and blood. She belonged to the Nightsisters, whether she realized it or not. Talzin had been watching Ventress's career from afar with maternal interest. The girl had survived terrible circumstances and grown powerful through sheer determination. But she served the wrong master and fought the wrong wars. Eventually, circumstances would drive Ventress home to Dathomir. When that happened, Mother Talzin would be ready. The betrayal that had ended Sirku's alliance with Dooku was just the beginning. The real conflict between Nightsisters and Sith was about to begin, and it would be far more personal than anyone involved could imagine. Asajj Ventress had spent years serving the man who would eventually try to end her life. When she finally escaped, she went looking for a home she barely remembered. The Nightsisters were about to welcome back one of their own and immediately use her for revenge. Ventress had left Dathomir as a small child, taken off-world before she could learn Nightsister ways or understand her heritage. Life had been cruel to her in the years since. She lost mentors, watched people she cared about perish, and eventually fell into the service of Count Dooku. The Sith Lord trained her as his personal assassin during the early Clone Wars. She became one of the most feared dark side users in the galaxy. Jedi fell to her twin red lightsabers. Republic officers learned to fear reports of her presence. Ventress carried out Dooku's orders with skill and dedication that should have earned his trust. Instead, it made her dangerous to him. In 19 years before the Battle of Yavin, Darth Sidious demanded proof of Dooku's loyalty. The Sith Master wanted his apprentice to eliminate Ventress as a test. She had grown too powerful and too skilled. Sidious saw her as a potential rival to his plans. Dooku obeyed without hesitation, setting a trap designed to end his assassin permanently. Ventress survived the attempt through a combination of skill, luck, and raw determination to live. She fled across the galaxy with separatist forces hunting her at every turn. Wounded and furious, she needed somewhere safe to recover and plan her next move. Only one place offered sanctuary from Dooku's reach. She returned to Dathomir for the first time since childhood. The planet looked nothing like her fragmentary memories. She had left as a girl and came back as a warrior shaped by violence and betrayal. But something about the world felt right despite all the years away. This was where she came from, even if she did not fully understand what that meant. Mother Talzin found Ventress wandering near Nightsister territory. The clan mother recognized her immediately despite the decades of separation. Talzin had kept track of the girl taken from Dathomir all those years ago. She knew about Ventress's training and service to Dooku. Now, the lost daughter had finally come home. Talzin welcomed Ventress as an estranged member of the clan. She offered healing, protection, and the belonging Ventress had been seeking her entire life. The younger woman found herself surrounded by witches who looked like her and practiced force abilities she had never seen before. For the first time, she was among her own people. But Talzin wanted more than just a reunion. She saw an opportunity to strike at the Sith who had wronged both Ventress and the Nightsisters through Circu's earlier betrayal. Dooku had made enemies he could not afford. The clan mother proposed a solution that would satisfy Ventress's need for revenge while protecting Dathomir from future separatist aggression. They would eliminate Count Dooku before he could move against the Nightsisters. Ventress knew his habits, security arrangements, and personal weaknesses better than anyone. Combined with Nightsister stealth magic, she could reach the Sith Lord despite his defenses. The plan was dangerous but achievable. Talzin selected 2 of her finest stealth warriors to accompany Ventress. These witches specialized in infiltration and silent operations. They prepared invisibility potions that would let them move through Dooku's palace unseen. They gathered poison extracted from Dathomirian creatures that could incapacitate even Force users. Every detail was planned carefully. The 3 Nightsisters traveled to Sereno, where Dooku maintained his ancestral palace. The Count felt secure on his homeworld, surrounded by guards and advanced security systems. He had no reason to expect an attack from someone he believed destroyed. That confidence would nearly cost him everything. They struck at night when Dooku slept in his private chambers. The invisibility potions worked perfectly, letting the witches slip past guards and security sensors without triggering alerts. They reached his bedroom and prepared their assault while the Sith Lord remained unaware of their presence. Ventress moved first, firing poisoned darts coated with venom specifically chosen to affect his species. The projectiles struck before Dooku fully woke. The poison began working immediately, attacking his nervous system and temporarily robbing him of sight. He thrashed blindly as the Nightsisters pressed their advantage. The fight that followed happened mostly in darkness. Dooku could not see his attackers clearly through the poison clouding his vision. The witches used this advantage ruthlessly, striking from multiple angles while he struggled to defend himself. For someone accustomed to dominating every confrontation, being overwhelmed by invisible opponents was terrifying. But Dooku had not survived decades as a Sith Lord without learning to fight through disadvantages. He abandoned his reliance on visual cues and reached out through the Force instead. His hands crackled with lightning that filled the chamber with blue-white light. He unleashed the energy in all directions, not caring what he hit. The Force lightning forced the Nightsisters back. Their invisibility offered no protection against attacks that did not need targeting. Ventress and her companions had to dodge and weave, while the Count filled his bedroom with deadly energy. The element of surprise was gone. Palace guards rushed toward the commotion. Alarms activated throughout the compound. The Nightsisters found themselves trapped in enemy territory with reinforcements arriving every second. Ventress made the tactical decision to withdraw rather than press an attack that had already failed. The 3 witches fought their way out of the palace, using their remaining potions and combat skills to escape the tightening net. They managed to reach their ship and flee Sereno, but the mission had failed. Dooku survived despite their best efforts. The Count was wounded and temporarily blinded, but he would recover. Worse yet, he now knew Ventress lived and had allied with the Nightsisters. Dooku understood immediately what this meant. The witches had declared war by attacking him in his own home. This went beyond Circu's earlier betrayal. This was personal and direct. The Sith Lord's rage burned cold and calculating. He wanted revenge against everyone involved. The Nightsisters would pay for their audacity. Ventress would regret surviving his first attempt to eliminate her. And Mother Talzin would learn that manipulating Sith Lords came with consequences she could not escape. But Dooku also saw opportunity in the situation. He still needed to replace Ventress as his dark side operative. The Nightsisters specialized in producing powerful Force users. Perhaps he could turn this conflict to his advantage by demanding they provide him a new apprentice as compensation. Mother Talzin anticipated this response. She had contingency plans already forming before Ventress returned from Sereno. The clan mother understood how Sith thought and what they valued. She could offer Dooku something that seemed valuable while actually serving her own purposes. She would give him a night brother enhanced through dark magic to be powerful and obedient. Or at least that was what Dooku would believe. The reality would be far more complicated. Talzin intended to place a weapon inside the Separatist leadership that she controlled completely. Ventress had failed to eliminate Dooku, but her attempt had set larger wheels in motion. The conflict between Nightsisters and Sith was escalating beyond simple assassinations. Both sides prepared for confrontations that would reshape Dathomir's future and determine whether the witches survived the Clone Wars. The Separatist war machine was turning its attention toward a single, isolated planet. General Grievous would soon receive orders that would lead to the darkest day in Nightsister history. But before that catastrophe arrived, one more piece needed to fall into place. A night brother named Savage Opress was about to become the center of everyone's schemes. Count Dooku wanted a replacement for the apprentice who betrayed him. Mother Talzin gave him exactly what he asked for, along with a trap he never saw coming. The plan was perfect except for one problem. Nobody considered what the weapon itself might want. Dooku contacted Dathomir after recovering from the assassination attempt. He demanded compensation for the Nightsisters' treachery. Talzin had attacked him through Ventress, violated guest rights, and proven themselves untrustworthy. The Sith Lord wanted something in return, or he would bring the full weight of the Separatist military against the witches. Mother Talzin agreed to his terms with surprising ease. She would provide Dooku a new apprentice to replace Ventress. This candidate would be stronger, more obedient, and completely loyal to the Count. Dooku found the offer suspicious, but also intriguing. He needed a powerful dark side operative, and the Nightsisters specialized in creating exactly that. Talzin brought Ventress into the selection process. The former apprentice knew what qualities Dooku valued in his servants. She understood what kind of warrior could survive Sith training and serve effectively. Together, they would choose the perfect candidate from among the Night Brothers. The selection trials took place in the Night Brother village, where males lived apart from the witches. Talzin and Ventress walked among the warriors, evaluating their physical capabilities and force sensitivity. They needed someone with raw power that could be enhanced through Nightsister magic. Someone strong enough to face Jedi in combat, and ruthless enough to follow orders without question. Savage Opress emerged as the obvious choice. This particular Night Brother stood taller and broader than his peers. His strength exceeded normal limits even before enhancement. He possessed force sensitivity that lay dormant and untrained. Most importantly, he had the kind of focused aggression that Dooku would recognize and appreciate. Savage had no say in being chosen. Night Brothers existed to serve Nightsister purposes. When the witches selected him for transformation, he could only accept what came next. His life belonged to them, just as every male on Dathomir belonged to the covens that raised them. The transformation ritual took place in the deepest parts of Nightsister territory. Talzin gathered her most powerful witches to channel the energy required. They would rebuild Savage Opress from the inside out, enhancing every aspect of his being while binding him to their will through unbreakable spells. Green mist filled the ritual chamber as the witches began their work. Savage screamed as dark magic rewrote his physical form. His body expanded beyond natural proportions. Muscles grew dense and powerful. His already considerable strength multiplied several times over. The pain was excruciating, but served a purpose in breaking his will. The Nightsisters layered binding spells into his mind as they worked. These enchantments would ensure obedience to Mother Talzin and Ventress above all others. Savage would follow their commands even when those orders contradicted what Dooku might want. The Sith Lord believed he was receiving a loyal apprentice. In reality, he was accepting a spy who answered to the witches. The transformation left Savage Opress changed in fundamental ways. He retained his basic personality and memories, but now possessed abilities that elevated him far above ordinary Night Brothers. His strength could match or exceed what enhancement drugs gave to other warriors. His pain tolerance had increased dramatically. Most importantly, he was bound to serve the Nightsisters through magic that overrode his own desires. Talzin presented this enhanced warrior to Count Dooku as promised compensation. The Sith Lord examined Savage carefully, testing his responses and measuring his force potential. Dooku was impressed despite his suspicions. This Night Brother showed promise that even Ventress had lacked at the beginning of her training. The Count accepted Savage as his new apprentice and began instructing him in Sith combat techniques. Dooku taught him lightsaber forms designed for power over finesse. He showed him how to channel rage into force attacks. The training was brutal and unforgiving, but Savage endured everything thrown at him without complaint. Under Dooku's tutelage, Savage became genuinely dangerous. He combined his enhanced physical abilities with Sith training in ways that made him effective against most opponents. Republic forces encountered him on various missions and learned to fear the massive warrior who seemed unstoppable in close combat. Even Jedi struggled against his overwhelming assault style. But beneath his obedience to Dooku, the binding spells remained active. Savage served the Count because the witches allowed it. His true loyalty belonged to Mother Talzin and Ventress. He was a living weapon aimed at Dooku's heart, waiting for the trigger that would activate him. That trigger came when Talzin decided the time was right. She and Ventress had been patient, letting Savage integrate himself into Dooku's operations and earn the Sith Lord's trust. Now they would use that trust to get close enough for a decisive strike. Ventress activated the binding spells that overrode Savage's conditioning. The betrayal happened in Dooku's chambers when the Count believed himself safe. Savage turned on his master without warning, his lightsaber igniting as Ventress appeared from the shadows. The Sith Lord found himself facing two opponents who had trained together specifically to bring him down. The three-way duel that erupted showcased different combat philosophies clashing violently. Dooku relied on elegant technique refined over decades. Ventress used speed and dual-blade tactics learned from years of assassination work. Savage brought overwhelming strength and aggression that made him nearly impossible to stop once committed to an attack. Dooku held his own despite facing two skilled opponents simultaneously. His mastery of Form 2 lightsaber combat gave him perfect economy of motion. Where Savage wasted energy on powerful strikes, Dooku conserved his strength through precise parries. Where Ventress tried to overwhelm him with speed, the Count anticipated her moves through superior experience. But the numerical advantage began telling over time. Even a Sith Lord could not maintain perfect defense forever against two determined attackers. Dooku found himself giving ground, forced into increasingly defensive positions. He unleashed Force lightning to create space, but Savage shrugged off the pain while Ventress dodged around the attacks. Then something unexpected happened. The stress of combat and the conflicting commands in his mind broke something in Savage. The binding spells that made him loyal to the witches clashed with the training Dooku had given him. The Force lightning overwhelmed his enhanced tolerance for pain. Everything became too much for his mind to process. Savage stopped caring about anyone's plans or orders. He was tired of being manipulated by Dooku, Ventress, and Talzin. They had all used him as a tool without considering what he might want. Rage at this treatment consumed every other thought. He would serve no one anymore. The Night Brother turned on everyone in the room. His massive strength and enhanced abilities made him equally dangerous to former allies and enemies. He struck at Dooku's guards when they rushed in to assist their master. He lashed out at Ventress when she tried to bring him back under control. Anyone within reach became a target. The chaos gave both Dooku and Ventress opportunities to escape. The Count retreated through secret passages in his palace while Savage rampaged through the corridors. Ventress fled when she realized the binding spells had shattered beyond repair. Her living weapon had turned into an uncontrollable force. Savage fought his way out of the palace and disappeared into the galaxy. He was free but also utterly alone. The Nightsisters had transformed him into something that could never return to normal life. Dooku had trained him in violence and hatred. Now he wandered without purpose or direction, driven by rage that had no constructive outlet. Mother Talzin's plan had failed completely. Dooku survived again despite her best efforts. Ventress returned to Dathomir with nothing to show for the elaborate scheme. Savage was lost somewhere in the galaxy, potentially dangerous to everyone he encountered. The Count now understood exactly how treacherous the Nightsisters could be. But Talzin had prepared for this possibility. She had given Savage something before he left Dathomir initially, a gift he probably did not even remember receiving. A magical talisman imbued with tracking spells and whispered suggestions. This artifact would eventually lead the lost Night Brother on a journey to find someone thought gone forever. Talzin's son had survived his encounter with Obi-Wan Kenobi decades earlier. Darth Maul lived in exile, broken in body and mind, but still connected to the Force and his mother through bonds that transcended death. Savage would find him eventually. When that reunion happened, everything would change for the Nightsisters and the galaxy. Meanwhile, Count Dooku prepared his retaliation. He had given the witches multiple chances, and they had betrayed him repeatedly. No more negotiations or alliances. The Separatists would strike Dathomir with overwhelming force and ensure the Nightsister threat ended permanently. General Grievous received orders that would lead to the darkest chapter in Nightsister history. Count Dooku had been patient with the Nightsisters for far too long. Now he would show them what happened when you betrayed a Sith Lord 3 times. General Grievous was about to turn Dathomir into a graveyard. In early 19 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Separatist fleet arrived in orbit around Dathomir without warning. Hundreds of ships carrying thousands of battle droids descended toward the Nightsister villages. Dooku had sent his most brutal commander with orders to leave nothing standing. No negotiations, no prisoners, just complete elimination of the witch threat. General Grievous led the assault personally. The cyborg general had earned his reputation through ruthless efficiency against opponents who thought themselves unbeatable. Jedi fell to his blade collection regularly. The Nightsisters would be no different despite their magical abilities. He deployed his forces for maximum overwhelming force rather than tactical finesse. The attack came at dawn, when most Nightsisters still slept. Battle droids poured into the village from multiple directions simultaneously. Blaster fire shattered the morning quiet as the witches scrambled to mount a defense. They had prepared for eventual retaliation after betraying Dooku repeatedly. But the scale of this assault exceeded their worst expectations. Mother Talzin rallied her followers with practiced authority. She had led the clan through decades of prosperity and would not let it end without a fight. The Nightsisters grabbed weapons and called upon their dark magic to defend their homeland. Green mist began forming as the witches tapped into Dathomir's primal energies. Asajj Ventress took command of the warrior witches. She had more combat experience than any other Nightsister against conventional military forces. Her time serving Dooku had taught her how droid armies operated and where their weaknesses lay. She organized defensive positions while other witches prepared rituals to counter the mechanical tide. The initial engagement went better than expected for the defenders. Nightsister magic proved highly effective against enemies without force sensitivity. Illusions confused droid targeting systems. Conjured mist obscured sight lines and disrupted communications. The witches fought with bows and energy weapons while their spells wreaked havoc on the invading forces. But the droids kept coming in numbers that seemed endless. Every squad destroyed was immediately replaced by reinforcements from the landing ships. The Separatists had committed overwhelming resources to this operation. Dooku wanted absolute certainty that no Nightsister survived to threaten him again. Old Daka, the eldest Nightsister and keeper of ancient rituals, decided desperate circumstances required desperate measures. She began an incantation that other witches had forbidden for generations. The spell to raise the recently fallen and bind them to serve the living. Necromancy on a scale Dathomir had not seen in centuries. The ritual succeeded beyond what anyone expected. Fallen Nightsisters rose from where they had collapsed moments earlier. Their eyes glowed with unnatural light as dark magic animated their forms. These undead warriors felt no pain and knew no fear. They threw themselves at the battle droids with single-minded purpose. The zombie army turned the tide briefly. Battle droids found themselves overwhelmed by opponents who ignored damage that would stop living fighters. The undead Nightsisters could absorb multiple blaster shots and keep attacking. They grabbed droids with superhuman strength and tore them apart with bare hands. General Grievous observed the necromantic reinforcements without concern. Undead enemies were still just enemies. They had weaknesses that could be exploited through sufficient firepower. He ordered his forces to increase their assault intensity and focus fire on individual targets until nothing remained capable of movement. The strategy worked. Massed blaster volleys disintegrated the animated corpses faster than old Daka could replace them. The ritual required enormous concentration and energy to maintain. She could not sustain it indefinitely against this level of attrition. The zombie army began falling apart as exhaustion overwhelmed the ancient witch. Meanwhile, Count Dooku remained in orbit aboard his command ship. The Nightsister poison from their earlier attack still affected him. He felt weak and sickened in ways that force healing could not completely cure. But rage at the witches who had done this to him burned stronger than any physical discomfort. The Sith Lord gathered the Force around himself and channeled his hatred into raw, destructive energy. Lightning exploded from his fingers and arced down through the atmosphere toward the battlefield below. The massive discharge scorched entire sections of the Nightsister village. Witches caught in the blast perished instantly as electricity consumed them. The Force lightning strike broke the defenders' coordinated resistance. Survivors scattered to avoid follow-up attacks while trying to regroup. The careful defensive positions Ventress had established collapsed into chaos. Individual witches fought isolated battles against overwhelming numbers with no hope of victory. General Grievous entered the village proper once his droids secured the perimeter. He moved through the streets with 4 lightsabers spinning in complex patterns. Any Nightsister who faced him directly lasted seconds at most. The cyborg general had trained specifically to counter Force users, and magical abilities meant nothing against his purely physical approach. Ventress found herself confronting Grievous amid the burning ruins of her ancestral home. She attacked with everything she had learned over years of combat experience. Her twin red blades moved in coordinated patterns designed to overwhelm single opponents. But Grievous was not a single opponent. He was 4 attackers sharing one body. The duel was brutally one-sided despite Ventress's skill. Grievous possessed speed and strength that matched or exceeded her enhanced abilities. His 4 arms attacked from angles that made perfect defense impossible. She managed to avoid serious injury through desperate acrobatics and Force-enhanced reflexes, but winning was never an option. Ventress made the tactical choice to flee rather than throw her life away meaninglessly. She disengaged from Grievous and ran through the chaos looking for any other survivors. The village was lost. The Nightsisters were being systematically eliminated. Staying meant certain defeat. Better to escape and live to fight another day. Mother Talzin faced her own impossible situation. Elite droid guards surrounded her position while more forces closed in from all directions. She had spent enormous energy casting spells to hinder the invaders. Her magical reserves were approaching empty. Physical escape was no longer possible. But Mother Talzin possessed knowledge that younger Nightsisters lacked. She understood the spirit realm in ways that went beyond simple necromancy. The boundary between physical and spiritual existence was not as solid as most beings believed. With sufficient will and power, that boundary could be crossed intentionally. She began dissolving into green mist as the droids opened fire. Her physical form came apart like smoke dispersing in wind. The blaster bolts passed through empty air where she had stood moments before. Mother Talzin's consciousness retreated into the spirit realm, abandoning her body to escape destruction. The technique preserved her existence but came at tremendous cost. Without physical form, she could no longer interact with the material world directly. She became a ghost trapped between dimensions, watching events unfold but unable to affect them through normal means. It was a kind of living end, neither truly alive nor completely gone. By the time the last shots echoed across the battlefield, the Nightsisters had been virtually eliminated as a cohesive force. Hundreds of witches lay scattered across their ruined village. The proud covens that had survived for centuries were reduced to a handful of desperate survivors hiding in the wilderness. Asajj Ventress escaped into the forests surrounding the Nightsister territory. She was one of perhaps 3 or 4 witches who managed to flee the complete destruction. Everyone else had fallen to the overwhelming separatist assault. Her home was gone. Her clan was destroyed. She was alone again, after briefly knowing what it meant to belong somewhere. Count Dooku received confirmation of the operation's success with satisfaction. The Nightsisters would never threaten him or his master's plans again. The witches who had betrayed him repeatedly had paid the ultimate price for their treachery. Dathomir was finally secure from their dark influence. General Grievous withdrew his forces after confirming no organized resistance remained. He left behind only ruins and the silence of the defeated. The cyborg general had completed countless similar operations during the Clone Wars. This was just another successful extermination of an enemy population. The galaxy barely noticed what happened on Dathomir. The Clone Wars consumed attention with battles on dozens of worlds simultaneously. One isolated planet falling to separatist assault rated minimal mention in Republic intelligence reports. Nobody mourned the Nightsisters because few even knew they existed. But the destruction was not quite as complete as Dooku believed. Some witches survived by being away from the main village during the attack. Others had hidden in remote caves when the battle turned against them. The older generation of pure human Nightsisters who had lived separately from Talzin's hybrid clan remained scattered across Dathomir in places Grievous never searched. The Nightsisters would eventually return, though it would take years and very different circumstances. For now, Dathomir belonged to ghosts and memories. The most feared witches in the galaxy had fallen to superior numbers and ruthless tactics. Their legacy seemed ended along with their physical existence. Mother Talzin's spirit watched from the realm between worlds, patient and planning. She had one more move to make that would shake the foundations of Sith power. Her son still lived somewhere in exile. When the time came, she would bring him back, and together they would have their revenge on those who destroyed her clan. Savage Opress wandered the galaxy searching for something he did not understand. The talisman Mother Talzin gave him whispered directions through the Force, leading him toward a reunion that would change everything. Somewhere in the darkness, a forgotten prince waited to reclaim his throne. The magical artifact guided Savage through hyperspace routes that made no logical sense. He followed the pull without questioning its purpose. The journey took him to forgotten sectors and abandoned systems that civilized space had left behind. Each jump brought him closer to his destination and his destiny. Lotho Minor was a junk world where the galaxy dumped waste too toxic or dangerous for normal disposal. Mountains of scrap metal and industrial debris covered the planet's surface. Toxic atmosphere killed most organic life that tried to exist there. Only the most desperate or damaged creatures survived in that hostile environment. Savage descended into the depths of a massive junk field, following the talisman's increasingly urgent pull. He found tunnels carved through the debris by something that had been living down here for years. The passages led deeper into darkness, lit only by flickering electrical fires and chemical reactions. Something moved in the shadows ahead. Savage ignited his lightsaber, ready for whatever threat emerged. What came crawling from the darkness barely resembled anything humanoid. The creature scuttled on spider-like mechanical legs attached to the lower half of a Zabrak torso. Its eyes held madness, and pain accumulated over more than a decade. The broken being spoke in fragments and riddles. It mentioned the Jedi who had cut it in half. It ranted about revenge and power stolen away. Savage listened carefully and began understanding what the talisman had led him to find. This pathetic creature was Darth Maul, the Sith apprentice presumed gone after his duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Maul had survived through pure hatred and connection to the dark side. His lower body was destroyed, but his vital organs remained intact. The fall down Naboo's reactor shaft should have ended him. Instead, he clung to life through force ability and sheer refusal to accept defeat. He eventually landed in a trash disposal system that transported him to Lotho Minor. For over 10 years, Maul existed in this hellish exile. He built crude mechanical legs from scrap to replace what he had lost. His mind fractured under the strain of constant pain and isolation. He forgot who he was beyond the rage that kept him breathing. The powerful Sith warrior became a mad hermit, haunted by memories he could barely understand. Savage recognized his kinsman despite the madness and modifications. They shared Zabrak heritage and Nightsister blood. More importantly, the talisman confirmed this was who Mother Talzin wanted him to find. Savage convinced the broken Maul to come with him back to Dathomir. Home could heal what exile had destroyed. The journey back took time because Maul's condition was so fragile. His mind wandered constantly between lucidity and delirium. He would recognize Savage one moment and attack him as an enemy the next. Only the promise of revenge kept him focused enough to cooperate with being transported. They arrived on Dathomir to find ruins where villages once stood. The separatist attack had left devastation across the landscape. Savage brought Maul to a hidden Nightsister lair that survived the assault. Ancient tunnels led deep beneath the surface to chambers where the oldest magic still lingered. Mother Talzin's spirit manifested in that sacred place. She appeared as green mist that coalesced into a ghostly form of her former self. Seeing her son reduced to this state broke something in her ethereal heart. She had lost her physical body escaping Grievous. Now she would give what remained to restore Maul. The ritual took place in a chamber carved with symbols from before Alia's time. Talzin gathered every scrap of magical energy she could access from the spirit realm. She called upon the fanged god and winged goddess for power. The green mist filled the space until nothing else was visible. Maul screamed as his mother's magic worked through him. The spell reached into his fractured mind and began reassembling the pieces. Memories returned in proper order. His sense of self reformed around the core of who he had been before exile broke him. Sanity flowed back like water filling a dried riverbed. Talzin also crafted new cybernetic legs to replace the crude spider limbs. These were elegant and functional, built from the same dark magic that enhanced Savage. They connected to Maul's nervous system perfectly and responded to his thoughts as smoothly as his original legs once had. The ritual consumed everything Talzin had left. Her spirit form grew fainter as she poured her essence into saving her son. The corporeal existence she had maintained even in spirit form dissolved completely. She became pure consciousness, existing in the realm between dimensions with no anchor to physical reality. When the green mist cleared, Darth Maul stood whole for the first time in over a decade. His mind was sharp and focused. His body responded to his commands without hesitation. The rage that sustained him through exile now had direction and purpose. He looked at his brother Savage and understood immediately what they would do next. Maul had scores to settle with everyone who wronged him. Obi-Wan Kenobi took his body and left him for gone. Darth Sidious replaced him as apprentice without a second thought. The galaxy moved on as if he never mattered. All of that would change now that he had returned. But revenge required resources. Maul needed an army and territory to operate from. He possessed the training and knowledge to build a criminal empire. His years as Sidious's apprentice taught him how to manipulate others and seize power. Time to put those lessons into practice. Maul created the Shadow Collective by uniting criminal organizations under his leadership. Death Watch provided Mandalorian warriors who wanted to overthrow their peaceful government. Black Sun contributed its criminal networks across civilized space. The Pike Syndicate brought spice trade profits. Other groups joined for various reasons, but all followed Maul's vision. The Alliance gave him military strength and financial resources to challenge established powers. Maul used this base to launch a campaign that shook the galaxy. His forces seized control of several systems through a combination of military action and political manipulation. The ultimate target was Mandalore itself. Taking Mandalore required careful planning. The planet's pacifist government had strong Republic support. Direct assault would bring immediate intervention. Instead, Maul engineered a crisis that let Death Watch seize power in what appeared to be a legitimate coup. Then he challenged their leader and took control for himself. Ruling Mandalore put Maul at the center of galactic attention. The Republic and Separatists both took notice of what he was building. More importantly, Darth Sidious recognized his former apprentice's handiwork in the chaos. The Sith Master realized Maul had not only survived, but was actively disrupting carefully laid plans. Sidious came to Mandalore personally to deal with this threat. He arrived without warning and confronted Maul and Savage in the royal throne room. The brothers attacked together, believing their combined strength could overcome even a Sith Lord. They were completely wrong. Sidious demonstrated exactly why he was the master, and they were merely apprentices. His lightsaber work exceeded anything either brother could match. His Force abilities made their attacks look clumsy and desperate. Within minutes, he had them both on the defensive. Savage tried to protect his brother, but Sidious cut him down without apparent effort. The enhanced Night Brother, who had been transformed to serve as a weapon, fell before the Sith Master's superiority. Maul watched his brother perish while unable to prevent it. Sidious did not end Maul's life despite having the perfect opportunity. Instead, he captured his former apprentice alive. Maul was too useful as bait. Mother Talzin would eventually try to rescue her son. When she did, Sidious would be ready to eliminate the Nightsister threat permanently. The trap was set. Maul found himself imprisoned again, this time by the master he once served. His brief return to power ended with defeat and captivity. But Mother Talzin was still out there in the spirit realm, watching and planning. She would not abandon her son to Sidious's schemes. The final confrontation between Nightsisters and Sith was approaching rapidly. Darth Sidious had been patient with the Nightsisters for years. Now he would personally ensure their complete elimination. Mother Talzin had one last chance to save her son and destroy the Sith who ruined everything. Only one side would walk away from Dathomir. Maul's Mandalorian loyalists broke him out of Sidious's prison through a daring raid. The Death Watch warriors, who still followed the former Sith apprentice, proved their worth by extracting him from what should have been an inescapable facility. Maul immediately knew where he needed to go. Dathomir was the only place offering any hope of defeating his former master. He returned to the ruined planet and sought his mother's spirit in the hidden places where Nightsister magic remained strongest. Talzin manifested in the ancient shrine beneath the devastation. Mother and son reunited with shared understanding that this would be their final gambit against the Sith. Together they devised a trap that required bait Sidious could not ignore. Count Dooku had been Sidious's apprentice for decades. Capturing him would force the Sith Master to respond personally. More importantly, Dooku's body could serve as a vessel for Talzin's return to physical form. The plan was risky, but their options had run out. Maul lured Dooku to Dathomir through false intelligence about separatist assets hidden on the planet. The Count arrived with minimal security, believing he was investigating a minor lead. Instead, he walked into an ambush orchestrated by the last Nightsister and her vengeful son. Mandalorian warriors surrounded Dooku before he realized the danger. Maul appeared with weapons aimed at the Sith Lord from multiple angles. Dooku reached for his lightsaber but found himself restrained by the Force before he could draw it. He was trapped and vulnerable in ways he had not experienced in years. Mother Talzin's spirit emerged from the shrine in a torrent of green mist. The spectral form she had maintained since escaping Grievous began pouring toward Count Dooku like living liquid. The Sith Lord struggled against invisible bonds as the magical ichor reached him and started forcing its way into his body. Talzin intended to possess Dooku completely and consume his life force in the process. This would restore her to physical existence while eliminating one of the Sith who destroyed her clan. The ritual began working as green energy filled Dooku from within. His eyes glowed with unnatural light as two consciousnesses fought for control of one body. But Darth Sidious had anticipated exactly this scenario. He knew Talzin would eventually try to rescue Maul. He had been monitoring Dathomir for any sign of Nightsister activity. When Dooku's distress signal activated, Sidious responded with overwhelming force. The Sith Master arrived with General Grievous and a battalion of battle droids. They descended on the Nightsister shrine while Talzin was still vulnerable during the possession ritual. Sidious had no intention of fighting fair or giving his enemies any advantage. He would crush them through superior numbers and power. The separatist forces stormed the ancient temple as Talzin's possession of Dooku reached its climax. She had nearly completed the ritual when Sidious entered the chamber with lightsaber ignited. The Sith Master unleashed Force lightning that shattered the magical working and threw everyone backward. Talzin's spirit was expelled from Dooku's body in a violent surge of conflicting energies. But instead of retreating back into the spirit realm, she used the momentum to manifest physically. The green ichor coalesced into solid form as Mother Talzin stood corporeal for the first time since the battle that destroyed her clan. She faced Darth Sidious with all the power she could summon from Dathomir's dark places. Nightsister magic clashed with Sith lightning in explosive displays that shook the shrine's foundations. Ancient stone cracked under the strain of two fundamentally different approaches to the dark side, colliding at full strength. Count Dooku recovered enough to join the fight against his former tormentor. General Grievous advanced with lightsabers spinning, focused on eliminating the witch who had caused the Separatists so much trouble. Talzin found herself facing 3 opponents simultaneously while trying to protect Maul from the crossfire. The battle showcased why Sidious ruled the galaxy's darkness. His mastery of the Force exceeded anything Talzin could match, even with Dathomir's power behind her. Every spell she cast was countered or overwhelmed. Every attack was turned against her. She was fighting a losing battle and knew it. But Talzin had one priority above her own survival. Maul needed to escape and live to continue their revenge. She used her magic to create barriers between her son and his enemies. Green energy wrapped around Maul and pushed him toward the exit despite his protests. He wanted to stay and fight, but his mother was not giving him that choice. Talzin's defenses weakened as she divided her attention between attacking Sidious and protecting Maul. Dooku exploited the opening with precision strikes that disrupted her spell work. Grievous pressed forward relentlessly, his mechanical body immune to fatigue or pain. The witch was being overwhelmed from multiple directions. General Grievous found his moment when Talzin focused entirely on blocking Sidious's lightning. The cyborg general rushed forward with all 4 arms extended. His lightsabers pierced through Talzin's torso in a coordinated strike that no amount of magic could deflect. The blades emerged from her back as green energy began leaking from the wounds. Mother Talzin screamed in pain and fury as her physical form started disintegrating. She had fought for her clan, her son, and her revenge against the Sith who destroyed everything. Now, she was failing at the moment victory seemed possible. Her last act was screaming for Maul to run and survive. The corporeal body she had worked so hard to reclaim dissolved into mist. But unlike her previous transformation, this was not a strategic retreat. The lightsaber strikes had destroyed her connection to the physical world permanently. Her spirit was severed from reality itself. Mother Talzin ceased to exist in any meaningful form. Maul fled through the shrine's back passages while his mother's final spell held his enemies at bay. He escaped Dathomir on a waiting ship, leaving behind the last place that had ever felt like home. His mother was gone. His brother was gone. The Nightsisters were effectively extinct. He was alone again with only his hatred to sustain him. Darth Sidious watched the witch's spirit dissipate with satisfaction. The Nightsister threat was finally eliminated after years of interference with Sith plans. Talzin had been dangerous specifically because she operated outside normal dark side hierarchies. With her gone, Dathomir posed no further risks to his empire. The Clone Wars continued toward their conclusion without the Nightsisters as a factor. The galaxy barely noticed their passing. Most beings had never heard of them. Those who knew the witches existed assumed they were legends or exaggerations. Only a handful of people understood what had truly been lost. Asajj Ventress learned of her clan's final destruction while hiding in the galaxy's criminal underworld. She mourned the loss of the home she had barely known and the mother figure who welcomed her back. Eventually, she would sacrifice herself on a mission that had nothing to do with Nightsister business. The last prominent member of Talzin's clan would perish far from Dathomir. The planet itself became a haunted ruin. Visitors in later years reported strange phenomena and ghostly apparitions. The spirits of Nightsisters remained trapped in the places they fell, unable to move on to whatever afterlife awaited them. These ghosts attacked anyone who disturbed the ruins, defending territory they no longer physically possessed. Jedi Knight Cal Kestis encountered these restless spirits years after the Clone Wars ended. Rebels like Sabine Wren faced similar supernatural threats during the Galactic Civil War. The Nightsisters left echoes of their power even in complete defeat. Their magic had been too strong to fade entirely just because their practitioners were gone. In official records, this marked the complete extinction of the Nightsisters as an organized force. Canon history treats them as finished after Talzin's demise. The witches who terrorized Dathomir for centuries were reduced to ghosts and memories. Their unique approach to the Force was lost along with their lives. But some stories suggest a few survivors remained hidden during these catastrophic events. Older Nightsisters who had lived separately from Talzin's main clan might have escaped both Grievous's attack and the final battle at the shrine. These witches would emerge later under familiar leadership. The name Gethzerion would rise again to haunt a different generation. For now, though, Dathomir belonged to ghosts and ruins. The Nightsisters had fallen from being the most feared witches in the galaxy to cautionary tales told by spacers who avoided certain hyperspace routes. Their legacy was destruction, darkness, and the proof that even the strongest Force users could be overwhelmed by sufficient determination and power. The founder of the Nightsisters refused to stay gone. Centuries after starting the clan, Gethzerion returned to lead what remained of her creation. This time, she would face an emperor who understood exactly how dangerous she was. By the time the Galactic Civil War erupted between Empire and Rebellion, decades had passed since Mother Talzin's demise. Most beings who knew about the Nightsisters believed them extinct. Dathomir sat abandoned and forgotten in Imperial star charts. Nobody paid attention to what happened on that isolated prison world anymore. But some witches had survived both General Grievous's attack and the final battle at the shrine. Older Nightsisters who lived separately from Talzin's main clan had hidden during the catastrophes. They waited through years of Imperial rule for the right moment to emerge. That moment came when Gethzerion decided the time was right to reclaim leadership. The ancient witch who founded the Nightsisters centuries earlier still lived despite her advanced age. Dark side power sustained her body far beyond natural limits. She had watched younger generations rise and fall while she endured. Now she gathered the scattered survivors and rebuilt what Grievous and Sidious had destroyed. Gethzerion's second reign was harsher than her first. She had learned from watching other leaders make mistakes. Talzin's mercenary approach created enemies the clan could not defeat. Zalem's ambition attracted attention that brought disaster. This time, Gethzerion would be more careful and more ruthless. She reunited the surviving witches under iron discipline. Any dissent was crushed immediately. Any weakness was eliminated without mercy. The new Night Sister clan would be smaller than Talzin's generation, but far more focused. They would survive through cunning rather than displaying their power openly. The Galactic Empire gave them an unexpected opportunity. Around the time of the Battle of Yavin, Imperial authorities decided Dathomir made an excellent remote prison. The planet's isolation and harsh environment suited their needs perfectly. They established a penal colony and began shipping dangerous criminals to the facility. Imperial officers running the prison had no idea Nightsisters existed on the planet. Their intelligence files mentioned ruins and legends, but nothing about active witch covens. They believed they were settling an empty world that happened to have hostile wildlife. The mistake would cost them dearly. Gethzerion observed the Imperial arrival with interest. These newcomers brought technology and transportation that the Nightsisters desperately needed. The orbital quarantine from the Clone Wars had long since lapsed. Ships came and went regularly servicing the prison. If the witches could control those ships, they could finally leave Dathomir. She made contact with the prison administrators through diplomatic channels. The Nightsisters offered to help track escaped prisoners and deal with dangerous creatures that threatened Imperial operations. In exchange, they wanted access to supplies and technology. The arrangement seemed mutually beneficial to officers who had no reason to distrust the offer. The cooperation worked exactly as Gethzerion planned. Nightsisters regularly interacted with Imperial personnel while providing genuinely useful services. They returned escaped prisoners and eliminated threats to the facility. The prison wardens grew to trust their native allies and let their guard down. That was when Gethzerion started corrupting them. She and her witches used dark side abilities to influence Imperial minds during every interaction. Hypnotic suggestions planted during casual conversations grew stronger over repeated exposure. Officers and stormtroopers gradually fell under Nightsister control without realizing what was happening to them. The process took months of careful manipulation. Gethzerion could not simply dominate hundreds of trained soldiers simultaneously. She had to work subtly, turning a few at a time while maintaining the illusion of cooperation. The enslaved Imperials continued performing their duties normally while secretly serving the witches. Eventually, the balance of power shifted completely. More Imperial personnel answered to Gethzerion than to their legitimate commanders. The Nightsisters effectively controlled the prison while the remaining loyal officers remained oblivious. The witches were positioning themselves to seize ships and escape when the time was right. But someone among the loyal Imperials noticed strange behavior patterns and reported concerns to their superiors. An investigation revealed the horrifying truth. The Nightsisters had infiltrated and corrupted significant portions of the garrison. Open conflict erupted as loyal troops tried to resist the compromised soldiers fighting for the witches. The prison facility descended into chaos as Imperial fought Imperial. Stormtroopers who days earlier served together now exchanged fire across the compound. Officers who trusted each other suddenly became enemies. The Nightsisters watched with satisfaction as their manipulation tore the Empire's presence apart from within. News of the situation reached Imperial High Command on Coruscant. Reports described dark side witches controlling trained soldiers through supernatural means. The description caught Emperor Palpatine's personal attention. He recognized the signs of Night Sister activity from intelligence gathered during the Clone Wars. Palpatine knew exactly how dangerous the witches could be. He had witnessed their abilities during his time as Darth Sidious. Mother Talzin had been powerful enough to challenge Sith Lords. If her successors possessed even a fraction of that capability, they posed a genuine threat to Imperial stability. The Emperor made a decision that shocked his military advisors. Rather than send reinforcements to reclaim Dathomir, he would quarantine the entire planet. Nobody would leave, nobody would enter. The Nightsisters would remain trapped regardless of the cost to stranded Imperial personnel. Palpatine ordered the immediate destruction of every ship on or near Dathomir. Star destroyers in orbit opened fire on the prison's landing facilities. Spacecraft attempting to flee were destroyed without warning. The spaceport and airfield were bombarded until nothing remained but craters and debris. The Emperor then established a strict orbital blockade. Any vessel approaching Dathomir would be turned away or destroyed. The planet was officially interdicted from all galactic contact. As far as Imperial records were concerned, Dathomir had ceased to exist as an accessible location. This extreme response accomplished Palpatine's goal, but at tremendous cost. Hundreds of Imperial personnel found themselves stranded on a hostile world with no hope of rescue. Stormtroopers, officers, support staff, and prisoners were all abandoned to whatever fate awaited them. The Emperor sacrificed them without hesitation to contain the Night Sister threat. Princess Leia would later explain the situation simply. The Emperor himself was afraid of the Night Sisters. That fear drove him to imprison an entire planet rather than risk confronting the witches directly. It was perhaps the greatest compliment the Night Sisters ever received, though it came at the price of permanent isolation. Gethzerion watched the orbital bombardment destroy her hopes of escape. The ships she had worked so hard to control were reduced to wreckage. The spaceport that could have carried her off-world became a smoking crater. Years of careful planning evaporated in minutes of Imperial firepower. But the ancient witch adapted quickly to changed circumstances. If she could not leave Dathomir, she would rule it completely. The stranded Imperials became her subjects, whether they wanted to be or not. The prison facility became her fortress. She would build a kingdom from the ruins of her failed escape. Over the following years, Gethzerion systematically conquered the remaining Imperial presence. Loyalist troops gradually fell to attrition and Night Sister magic. The witches enslaved survivors and forced them to work on projects that might eventually produce a functioning escape craft. Engineers labored under magical compulsion to build ships from salvaged parts. The effort was futile, given available resources, but it kept the prisoners occupied and hopeful. Gethzerion understood that enslaved beings worked harder when they believed their labor might lead to freedom. She allowed them to maintain that illusion while ensuring they never actually succeeded. Dathomir became Gethzerion's personal kingdom, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. She ruled absolutely over witches, prisoners, and Imperial remnants alike. The micro-empire was small and isolated, but completely under her control. It was not the galactic influence she once dreamed of, but it was power nonetheless. The Night Sisters' existence faded into legend outside the quarantine zone. Spacers told stories about a haunted prison world where dark witches supposedly lived. Most dismissed these tales as superstition. The few who knew the truth kept quiet to avoid sounding insane. Gethzerion waited patiently for circumstances to change. Imperial patrols would eventually weaken as the rebellion challenged Palpatine's grip on the galaxy. Some ship would eventually come close enough to be seized. She just needed time and opportunity. The ancient witch had survived centuries through patience. She could wait a few more years for another chance at freedom. Eight years after the Battle of Yavin, opportunity finally arrived for Gethzerion. High-profile rebels were stranded on her prison world. She would use them to buy her freedom or perish trying. Imperial warlord Zinj was about to teach her that some deals are too good to be true. The New Republic had overthrown Emperor Palpatine and shattered his empire into feuding remnants. Imperial warlords carved out their own territories while the legitimate government collapsed. One of these warlords, Zinj, controlled significant military assets, including the space above Dathomir. Princess Leia Organa found herself on the quarantined planet during a complicated situation involving Imperial pursuit and political maneuvering. Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and other notable rebels accompanied her. Their ship was damaged, and they were stranded on a world they knew almost nothing about. The visitors quickly discovered Dathomir was inhabited by Force-sensitive witch clans. Some practiced light-side traditions descended from the original daughters of Aliyah. Others followed darker paths that made them extremely dangerous. The Nightsisters under Gethzerion represented the most immediate threat to the stranded rebels. Gethzerion saw these newcomers as her ticket off-world. Han Solo was a general in the New Republic and one of the rebellion's greatest heroes. Warlord Zinj would pay handsomely for such a valuable prisoner. More importantly, the transaction would require a ship to transport the captive. That ship was what Gethzerion truly wanted. She ordered her Nightsisters to capture Solo while avoiding direct confrontation with Luke Skywalker. The ancient witch recognized a trained Jedi when she saw one. Skywalker represented a threat that required careful handling. But Solo was just a pilot without Force abilities. He could be taken relatively easily. The Nightsisters used their magic to separate Solo from his companions and ambush him in the wilderness. Despite his combat skills and quick thinking, Han found himself overwhelmed by multiple witches attacking with supernatural advantages. They bound him with spells and brought him to Gethzerion's fortress. The ancient Nightsister then initiated contact with Warlord Zinj through salvaged Imperial communications equipment. She offered a straightforward trade. Han Solo in exchange for immediate passage off Dathomir for herself and her inner circle of witches. The warlord could have his prize, and she would finally escape her planetary prison. Zinj agreed to the terms with surprising speed. He would send a shuttle to retrieve the prisoner and transport the Nightsisters to his fleet. From there, Gethzerion could go wherever she pleased while he dealt with his valuable captive. The deal seemed perfect for both parties, but Gethzerion had no intention of honoring the agreement. She planned to seize the shuttle once aboard and escape with Han Solo as her own prisoner. The New Republic would pay even more for their hero than any Imperial warlord. She had been manipulating beings for centuries and saw no reason to start keeping her word now. Zinj anticipated exactly this kind of betrayal. He had not survived the Empire's fall by trusting anyone, especially dark-side witches with reputations for treachery. The warlord prepared his own trap designed to eliminate the Nightsister threat while maintaining plausible deniability about what happened to Solo. The exchange was arranged at the ruined spaceport that Palpatine had bombarded years earlier. Gethzerion selected her most powerful and loyal witches to accompany her. These were the core of her clan, the Nightsisters who had survived everything the galaxy threw at them. Together, they would finally leave Dathomir and reclaim their place as feared operators across civilized space. The Imperial shuttle descended to the surface as promised. It touched down amid the debris and craters that marked where the facility once stood. Gethzerian and her chosen sisters approached with Han Solo bound and drugged to prevent escape attempts. Everything was proceeding according to plan. They boarded the shuttle with their prisoner secured in the cargo hold. The pilot was a standard Imperial officer who showed no signs of unusual orders. The craft lifted off smoothly as Gethzerion allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. After years of imprisonment, she was leaving Dathomir at last. The shuttle cleared the atmosphere and began approaching Zinj's fleet in orbit. This was the moment Gethzerion intended to make her move and seize control. But Zinj made his move first. Two star destroyers that had been holding position suddenly opened fire on the small transport. Turbo-laser batteries designed to destroy capital ships unleashed their full power on the shuttle. The vessel had no shields capable of withstanding that level of firepower. It disintegrated in seconds under the devastating barrage. Metal vaporized. Systems exploded. Everyone aboard ceased to exist in the time it takes to blink. Gethzerion's centuries of life ended in fire and vacuum. The founder of the Nightsisters, who had survived generation after generation, finally met her finish at the hands of someone more ruthless than herself. Her most powerful followers perished alongside her, the leadership of the clan destroyed in a single brutal stroke. On the ground, Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker felt the disturbance through the Force. Something terrible had just happened above them. They did not yet know the details, but understood the battle for Dathomir had entered a new phase. Han's fate remained uncertain, while the Nightsisters' reaction to losing their leader would be immediate and violent. The surviving Nightsisters on the surface descended into chaos when they learned of Gethzerion's destruction. Without central leadership, the various witches who served her began fighting among themselves. Some wanted revenge against everyone involved. Others sought to claim leadership for themselves. The unified front that made them dangerous fractured into squabbling individuals. Luke allied with the light side witch clans who had been oppressed under Nightsister rule. The Singing Mountain clan, led by Ogwyn Jo, represented the legitimate heirs to Alia's original teachings. They welcomed Jedi assistance against the dark witches who had terrorized them for so long. Together they hunted down the remaining Nightsisters across Dathomir's wilderness. Some witches were defeated in direct confrontation. Others were captured and contained. A few managed to flee into remote areas where pursuit was impossible. But as an organized force, the Nightsisters ceased to exist on that day. The light side clans reclaimed territories the Nightsisters had controlled. They freed enslaved Imperial personnel and Night Brothers who had been held as property. Dathomir began healing from decades of dark rule as legitimate witch leadership reasserted authority. Han Solo survived the orbital destruction through fortunate timing. He had been rescued by Leia and Luke before boarding the shuttle. A duplicate had been substituted to maintain the deception. When Zinj destroyed the transport, he eliminated only Nightsisters and an empty prison uniform. The warlord believed he had removed both threats simultaneously. The experience brought Han and Leia closer together during their time on Dathomir. The planet that had been such a nightmare became the place where Han finally convinced Leia to marry him. Something positive emerged from the horror of Nightsister oppression. From the New Republic's perspective, the Night Sister problem was solved. The Dark Witches were scattered or gone. Dathomir could be integrated into galactic civilization without the threat of magical terrorists. Princess Leia reported the successful liberation to Republic authorities, who were grateful the situation resolved without requiring military intervention. But eliminating one generation of Night Sisters did not erase the concept itself. Young witches who learned dark magic would eventually gather under that name again. The teachings survived in hidden places and remembered traditions. As long as the temptation to use the Force without moral restraint existed, someone would eventually follow the Night Sister path. Dathomir's legacy was not finished despite Gethzerion's destruction. The planet's dark places still whispered to those willing to listen. The ruins held secrets that future generations would discover and exploit. The cycle that began with Alia's exile would continue repeating itself as long as Force users walked the galaxy. For now, though, the Night Sisters were defeated as thoroughly as any group could be. Their leadership was eliminated, their power was broken, their reputation was in ruins. Anyone who wanted to resurrect the clan would need to start from almost nothing and rebuild what took centuries to create the first time. Gethzerion had lived long enough to see her creation destroyed twice. She founded the Night Sisters in defiance of her mother and light side traditions. She watched them nearly exterminated during the Clone Wars. She rebuilt them into a force that made Emperor Palpatine himself afraid. And she perished trying to escape the prison that fear created. It was a fitting end for someone who spent centuries pursuing power at any cost. She achieved influence and fear across multiple generations. But in the final moment, all that power meant nothing against superior firepower and a warlord who understood her nature perfectly. The Night Sisters had been outsmarted by someone as ruthless as they were. The age of Gethzerion was over. The question now was whether anyone would be foolish or ambitious enough to follow in her footsteps. The Night Sisters refused to stay gone, no matter how many times they were defeated. A new generation rose from hiding with fresh ideas about how dark witches should operate. This time, they would bring their magic to the entire galaxy through alliance with forces that shared their hatred of the Jedi. 23 years after the Battle of Yavin, Dathomir had largely recovered from Gethzerion's reign. Light side clans controlled most territories while maintaining the traditions Alia established centuries earlier. The planet seemed peaceful for the first time in generations. But darkness always finds a way to return. Tamith Kai had been a young initiate during Gethzerion's final years. She survived the purge that followed the ancient witch's destruction by hiding in remote areas while light side clans hunted her sisters. For 15 years, she remained in the wilderness, practicing forbidden magic and nurturing resentment against those who destroyed her clan. She was not alone in her exile. Other young Night Sisters had escaped into Dathomir's wild places during the chaos. They lived separately, afraid to gather and draw attention. But Tamith Kai decided isolation served no purpose except ensuring their tradition died with them. She began seeking out other survivors. The process took years of careful searching. Tamith Kai traveled across Dathomir, contacting hidden witches and convincing them to unite. She promised they could rebuild what was lost and become powerful again. Not through open confrontation that had failed repeatedly, but through subtlety and strategic alliances. She established her new clan in the Great Canyon, a remote formation far from light side territories. The location offered natural defenses and privacy to develop their abilities without interference. Witches who joined her brought knowledge preserved from previous generations. Together, they began reconstructing Nightsister teachings, but Tamith Kai introduced changes that would have shocked earlier clan mothers. She accepted male Force users into her group as equals rather than slaves. This broke with centuries of tradition that kept Night Brothers subordinate. Her reasoning was practical rather than ideological. Males with Force abilities were too valuable to waste on manual labor. The decision caused tension among older members who remembered traditional hierarchy. But Tamith Kai was building something new rather than recreating what existed before. The old ways had led to repeated destruction. Perhaps different approaches would produce better results. Her most radical move was seeking outside assistance. Previous Nightsisters had been isolationist or mercenary, but always independent. Tamith Kai recognized her small clan lacked resources and knowledge to challenge Luke Skywalker's growing Jedi Order alone. She needed powerful allies who shared her goals. The Imperial Second Imperium provided exactly what she needed. This splinter faction consisted of former Imperials who refused to accept the Empire's defeat. They worshipped Emperor Palpatine's memory and sought to restore his vision of galactic order. More importantly, they operated a secret training facility called the Shadow Academy. The Shadow Academy taught dark side Force techniques to students who would become the new generation of Imperial enforcers. Its headmaster, Brakis, was a failed Jedi who turned to darkness after Luke Skywalker tried redeeming him. He welcomed Tamith Kai's offer of alliance because Nightsister magic could augment his curriculum. Tamith Kai sent her most promising initiates off-world to train at the Shadow Academy. These young witches learned conventional dark side abilities that complemented their Nightsister spells. They studied lightsaber combat, Force lightning, and other techniques unknown on Dathomir. In return, they taught Shadow Academy students about illusions and necromancy. The exchange benefited both groups tremendously. Nightsisters gained combat training that made them effective against Jedi opponents. Second Imperium forces acquired magical abilities that gave them advantages Republic intelligence did not anticipate. Together, they prepared to strike at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy on Yavin 4. The Academy represented everything both groups opposed. Luke trained young Force users in light side philosophy and Republican values. His students would become the next generation of Jedi protecting the New Republic. If the Second Imperium and Nightsisters could destroy or corrupt these younglings, they would cripple Jedi resurgence. Tamith Kai participated directly in attacks on the Jedi Academy. She led Nightsister warriors in raids designed to capture students for conversion or elimination. Her magic proved highly effective against Jedi who had no experience defending against Nightsister techniques. Several missions succeeded in creating chaos and fear. She dueled Luke's niece and nephew Jaina and Jacen Solo during one particularly bold assault. The twins were among the Academy's most talented students despite their youth. Fighting them gave Tamith Kai insight into how the new generation of Jedi approached combat. She found them skilled but inexperienced in ways she could exploit. The conflict escalated over months as both sides maneuvered for advantage. The Second Imperium revealed its existence and declared war on the New Republic. The Shadow Academy launched a full assault on Yavin 4, intending to destroy Luke's academy completely. Tamith Kai and her Nightsisters participated in what they hoped would be their final victory. The battle for Yavin 4 was fierce and chaotic. Shadow Academy forces attacked from orbit while Nightsisters infiltrated the temple grounds. Jedi students defended their home with desperate courage against enemies who wanted them dead or corrupted. Luke Skywalker led the defense while coordinating with New Republic reinforcements. Tamith Kai fought through the temple seeking high-value targets. She wanted to personally eliminate Luke or capture his most promising students. But the Jedi Master had prepared his academy for exactly this kind of assault. His students worked together using tactics that countered individual superiority with coordinated teamwork. The Nightsister leader found herself surrounded and overwhelmed despite her considerable power. Multiple Jedi engaged her simultaneously while she was separated from her sisters. She fell during the battle's climax, her ambitions ending before achieving the victory she sought. The Shadow Academy was destroyed, along with most Second Imperium leadership. The attack on Yavin 4 failed completely, breaking the splinter faction's military capability. Without their Imperial allies, Tamith Kai's Nightsister clan lost its support structure and protection. The fate of her followers on Dathomir remained unclear. Some may have perished when Second Imperium collapsed. Others probably fled back into hiding when their plans fell apart. The clan Tamith Kai built fragmented just as previous Nightsister generations had before it. But at least one of her students escaped to continue the tradition elsewhere. Lomi Plo had been among the most talented initiates Tamith Kai sent to the Shadow Academy. This young Nightsister possessed abilities that made her exceptionally dangerous. She vanished during the battle's confusion and went into deep hiding. Lomi Plo would eventually surface years later as an enemy during the Dark Nest crisis. Her survival proved that Nightsister knowledge continued spreading even when clans were destroyed. Individual practitioners could carry the teachings to new locations and influence events across the galaxy. Luke Skywalker recognized this pattern with growing concern. Every time someone defeated the Nightsisters, survivors emerged later to rebuild. The tradition was like a disease that kept returning in new forms. Simply defeating individual witches accomplished nothing permanent. The fundamental problem was that dark side temptation never disappeared. As long as Force users existed, some would choose power over discipline. The Nightsister approach appealed to those who wanted results without moral constraints. Each generation would produce new adherents unless something changed at a deeper level. Tamith Kai's experiment with male equality and outside alliances showed the tradition was evolving. Future Nightsisters might look very different from Gethzerion's clan or Talzin's coven. They would adapt to new circumstances while maintaining core beliefs about power and independence. The new Jedi Order would need to develop strategies beyond simple combat victories. Luke understood that defeating Nightsisters in battle only created temporary respites. Real solutions required addressing why Force users chose darkness in the first place. Otherwise, the cycle would continue indefinitely. For now, though, the immediate threat was neutralized. Tamith Kai was gone, and her organization was scattered. The Shadow Academy would not threaten another generation of students. But somewhere in the galaxy, other witches were learning Nightsister magic and planning their own bids for power. The legacy that began with Alia's exile continued evolving. Each generation added new elements while preserving the essential nature of what made Nightsisters terrifying. They were Force users who rejected both Jedi and Sith philosophies to forge their own path through darkness. And that path would always find willing travelers. For decades after the Battle of Yavin, The Nightsisters made one final bid for power. This time, they faced not just Jedi, but ancient Sith and cosmic horrors that threatened the entire galaxy. It would be their last major appearance in recorded history, but not quite their final word. The galaxy was tearing itself apart again during what historians called the Second Galactic Civil War. Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order struggled against threats emerging from every direction. A hidden civilization called the Lost Tribe of the Sith had survived in isolation for thousands of years and now returned seeking conquest. Worse yet, a being named Abeloth was awakening with power that dwarfed anything mortals could comprehend. On Dathomir, the light side witch clans decided this chaos required them to unite. They had spent centuries divided into separate groups that rarely cooperated. Now, they would bind themselves into a stronger alliance capable of surviving whatever catastrophes the galaxy threw at them. Two major clans, the Broken Columns and Reigning Leaves, arranged a unification ceremony. The Nightsisters saw perfect opportunity in this gathering. Light side witches would be concentrated in one location with their attention focused on ceremony rather than defense. A surprise attack could eliminate multiple clan mothers and throw Dathomir back into the chaos that dark witches exploited best. A Nightsister clan that had been hiding in remote territories launched their assault during the unification ritual. Dark witches emerged from the wilderness, wielding magic that most light side practitioners had forgotten existed. They attacked with illusions, curses, and necromantic spells designed to spread panic and destruction. But the ceremony had attracted guests beyond what the Nightsisters anticipated. Luke Skywalker and his son Ben were present as representatives of the Jedi Order. The Skywalkers had been building relationships with Dathomir's legitimate witch clans as part of broader alliance efforts. Their presence transformed what should have been an easy massacre into a genuine battle. Luke had faced dark side users throughout his life, but never Nightsisters specifically. Their magic operated differently from Sith or Dark Jedi techniques he knew how to counter. The green mist, the illusions, the way they channeled Dathomir's primal energy required adapting his approach mid-combat. Ben fought alongside his father while the allied witch clans rallied their defenses. A former Sith apprentice named Vestara Kai, who had recently turned toward the light, also participated in the battle. The combination of Jedi skill, light side magic, and insider knowledge of dark side tactics gradually turned the fight against the Nightsisters. The attacking witches found themselves outmatched despite their initial advantage. They had assumed numerical superiority and surprise would carry the day. Instead, they faced coordinated defense from multiple Force traditions working together. One by one, the Nightsisters fell or were captured as their assault collapsed. The survivors were bound with spells and taken prisoner by the allied clans. These captured witches faced uncertain fates at the hands of enemies they had just tried to eliminate. But their story took an unexpected turn when the lost tribe of the Sith entered the situation. The Sith were searching for any advantage in their struggle against Luke's Jedi and the various threats plaguing the galaxy. They learned about the captured Nightsisters and recognized potential value in their unique abilities. Sith philosophy always emphasized gathering power from any available source. Dark magic was just another tool to acquire. The Lost Tribe took custody of the Nightsister prisoners through force and political maneuvering. They brought the witches to their facilities and demanded they share their knowledge. The Nightsisters had no choice except compliance. They taught their captors about spells and rituals that Sith had never encountered before. One technique particularly interested the Lost Tribe. The Control Web was a Nightsister spell that allowed dominating multiple beings simultaneously through invisible connections. It was subtle and powerful, exactly what the Sith needed for their plans. The captured witches showed them how to weave the patterns and channel the necessary energy. This alliance between Nightsisters and Sith was brief and involuntary. The witches served because they were prisoners rather than willing partners. But the knowledge transfer happened regardless of motivation. Nightsister magic was spreading beyond Dathomir again through the worst possible channels. The situation escalated as Abeloth's presence grew stronger. This cosmic entity possessed power that made ordinary dark side users look insignificant. She corrupted everything she touched and threatened to consume the Force itself. Luke realized defeating her required cooperation between groups that normally considered each other enemies. The Jedi allied with various factions, including some elements of the Lost Tribe, who recognized Abeloth as a threat to their own existence. The resulting conflict consumed attention across multiple systems. When the dust settled, Abeloth was defeated through combined efforts that cost many lives. The Lost Tribe of the Sith was broken as a unified force during these events. The Nightsisters who had been teaching them were neutralized as well, either through the chaos of battle or deliberate action by those who wanted their dangerous knowledge contained. By the time peace returned, both groups had been reduced to scattered remnants. Luke reflected on what the Nightsisters represented after this final confrontation. They had appeared throughout galactic history in various forms, always returning despite being defeated repeatedly. From Alia's original exile to this latest attempt at power, the pattern remained consistent. Dark Force users who rejected both Jedi and Sith philosophies to forge their own terrible path. The Nightsisters proved that eliminating an idea was far harder than defeating its adherents. You could scatter a clan, capture their members, even end entire generations. But as long as the temptation toward darkness existed, someone would eventually embrace Nightsister teachings and try again. Their story spanned centuries of galactic history. They raised armies of the undead during the Clone Wars. They corrupted Imperial forces during the Galactic Civil War. They trained Dark Jedi during the New Republic era. And now they had taught Sith forbidden magic during the Second Galactic Civil War. Each era produced new Nightsisters who adapted the tradition to current circumstances. What made them uniquely terrifying was not just their power, but their independence. Sith followed rules and hierarchies that made them somewhat predictable. Jedi operated according to codes that limited their actions. Nightsisters answered to no authority except their own ambitions. They could appear anywhere, ally with anyone, and pursue any goal their magic could achieve. Their legacy persisted even after their apparent end. In the main Star Wars canon, the Clone Wars' destruction of Mother Talzin's clan marked their extinction as an organized force. But survivors like the Nightsister Merrin carried knowledge forward. Ghost encounters on Dathomir suggested their spirits remained bound to the planet. The possibility of resurrection never fully disappeared. In the Legends timeline where these final battles occurred, the Nightsisters were thwarted repeatedly over more than 600 years. Yet each defeat was temporary. Each extinction proved incomplete. The cycle of darkness, destruction, and resurrection continued because the fundamental conditions that created Nightsisters never changed. Force users would always face temptations toward power without restraint. Isolated communities would always develop their own dark traditions. Ambitious individuals would always seek magic that conventional training did not provide. As long as these factors existed, something like the Nightsisters would keep emerging. Their ability to harness dark magic, raise the recently fallen, and conjure nightmares made them sources of fear across generations. Parents on Dathomir told children stories about Nightsisters to teach caution. Spacers avoided certain regions because rumors suggested dark witches operated there. Even Jedi masters who faced countless dangers felt unease when green mist appeared. The Nightsisters were proof that evil could be beaten, but would find ways to return in new forms. Each generation believed they had finally ended the threat permanently. Each generation was wrong. The witches adapted, survived, and eventually rebuilt using whatever resources their era provided. 6 centuries after Alaya's exile created the conditions for their emergence, Nightsisters remained part of galactic consciousness. They were legends that refused to stay legendary. They were history that kept becoming current events. They were the darkness that reminded everyone why the light mattered. The galaxy would probably never be completely free of them. Somewhere on Dathomir or scattered across distant systems, knowledge of Nightsister magic survived in hidden forms. Future Force users would discover those teachings and make choices about how to use them. Some would resist temptation. Others would embrace the power and become the next generation of dark witches. The Nightsisters taught the galaxy an uncomfortable truth. Monsters are not created by single events or corrupted by specific teachers. They emerge from fundamental aspects of existence itself. The only defense was eternal vigilance and the willingness to stand against darkness whenever and wherever it appeared. That lesson would outlive every Nightsister who ever existed. And perhaps that was the most terrifying thing about them.